Great to see such a great turnout from like all parts of Rutgers, really. Both sides of the river and even further away. And I'm really excited to have Antoinette WinklerPrins. Did I say that right? I should have practiced before.
It's all right. You got it.
Yeah. So it was visiting us today from, she's the program director for geography and spatial science at the National Science Foundation. And she's here today to tell us about how we can benefit from them, I guess, and how we can like improve our chances to getting grants and so on. So Antoinette she's a geographer, and she has a PhD in geography from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And before you came to NSF, you were faculty at the Michigan State University.
Mm-hmm.
You're still affiliated
No.
with Johns Hopkins?
Yeah, with Johns Hopkins, yes,
Hopkins,
but
yeah.
not Michigan State.
Not Michigan State, yeah. And so she's very much still involved in geography, and you're in the AG, or I don't know if you still are, but I saw some note that you were a counselor.
I have been a counselor for AG. I'm now a counselor for AGS, which is the American Geographical Society, which puts out the Geographical Review. Which is a very different organization, but
yeah.
Yeah.
And I checked one of your many web pages, and it's clear that you're well-traveled. There's like pictures of you everywhere. And your research seems to be covering a lot of places too. Like I read that you've done research projects in the Amazon, in Kenya, in Mexico, and in the United States. A lot focusing on, well, you have a training in both urban geography and soil science.
Yes.
So I can see how your research combines both, are trying to like understand both human and physical geography, work about environmental knowledge system, agriculture, biodiversity, and sustainable livelihoods in urban and rural areas. So really fascinating. But today, this is just to give you some more to talk about during our lunch that will follow this presentation. Because now we're going to hear about your work. What we're going to hear now is informed by your work at NSF.
Yes.
So, welcome.
Super, come on. Please come on in. There's still some seats in the back. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. My first time to Rutgers. You know, I've been at a state university, so I know how big the campuses are, but this one, yeah. It was good that I was given a specific parking lot to come to, because if I just put into Google Rutgers, I would have ended up on the other side of the river and had to figure out your bus system. Which would have been fine, but I might have been late. So anyway, I'm really delighted to be here. I'm one of 3 program officers at the National Science Foundation in a program called Geography and Spatial Sciences. My colleagues are Tom Bearwald, some of you may know him or at least know his name, and our most recent addition is Jackie Evagenic. She's a rotator from Oklahoma State University, and I say rotator because the way the National Science Foundation operates is that it has a permanent staff, but it also has about 1/3 of its staff, especially its scientific staff, rotates in for a few years. And so what that means is that a faculty, say at Rutgers, who wants to come and spend a couple years at NSF can do so as a rotating program officer, or sometimes as a division director or other positions, and work there while still keeping their old job. So when I first went to NSF, I was faculty at Michigan State University and then spent 2 years at NSF. I then liked it so much that I wanted to stay, but those rotations you can't actually convert to permanent. So then I had to leave, and I did. I went to Johns Hopkins, and I directed some programs in environmental sciences and in GIS. And then a couple years ago, there was a permanent opening, and I was able to go back. So that is my full-time job. Although I still teach periodically for Johns Hopkins. I teach sustainable food systems, an online course. And I still do a little bit of research because NSF actually gives you time and a little bit of money to remain research active. They want their program officers to still be reading the literature and be up to date. So my work now is on global urban agriculture, which kind of stitches together a lot of pieces of my academic life. And I have a book out called Global Urban Agriculture. So But my day job is administering and running grant competitions in geography and spatial sciences. So what I'm going to share with you today is some information about NSF and then some tips and strategies about being successful at NSF. How many of you are graduate students? Just curious. All right, good, excellent. And the rest of you are faculty, or do I have any administrators here? Some people probably with multiple roles like Robin and others. Yes, okay, great. If at any time you have specific questions, please feel free to ask. If I know that I will answer that question in 2 slides, then I will tell you that. If not, I will answer as we go, because sometimes things come up as we go along. Although you're all here to hear about NSF, the first tip in grant writing is to actually figure out the funding sources and what their goals and missions are. Because success in grant writing sometimes has a lot to do with fit between your research interests and your ideas about that and the funder's missions and goals. And so there are lots of sources of funding out there, and you have to spend a fair bit of time figuring out what of all of these, and this is just a handful of sources that geographers have been successful in. There are many more out there, but they all require crafting of a proposal with different twists to them. It's not like you can write one proposal and send it off to all these folks, because that's not going to work. You need to craft them and be know what all the rules and regs are for each of these. So sometimes when you're not successful in getting a grant from one of these funders, you should go back and ask yourself, where I'm sending my proposal, is it really the best place for my type of research? Because it might be a really fabulous topic and proposal, but it may not be landing in the right place. But we will then talk about NSF. Come on in. It's okay. We don't mind. Come on in. Which reminds me, there is a sign-up sheet going around, and some of you came in later. Okay. If you haven't signed yet and you're in the front, be sure before you leave you sign up. And I will share these PowerPoint slides with all of you and Asa so that so don't feel like you have to jot everything down. This is all open. This is your tax dollars at work. Which brings me to the next point. So despite the term foundation, NSF is a federal agency. So we're one of many smaller agencies. So we're part of the executive branch of the US government. That has all sorts of implications, including that I'm here on taxpayer dollars coming to talk with you. But we are an independent agency, again, part of the executive branch. So unlike something like NIH, the National Institutes of Health, which falls under the cabinet level Health and Human Services, we're independent, and what we report to is actually the Office of Science and Technology Policy right in the White House. To date, not much has happened there. Okay, I can't be political in my statements, but let's just say it's been pretty quiet there. So we've been just busy doing what we do, which is to receive grant proposals and to make our funding decisions about those. Our budget has remained flat. We have not been as scrutinized as some agencies such as EPA and a few others. We've just been quietly doing our business. Our director is a carryover from the Obama administration. She had an appointment, unlike so many, was hands in a resignation, but was told to continue until her term ends, and that's in 19 sometime. So that will be interesting to see what happens. But for now, we're just quietly doing what we do without a whole lot of attention by the White House. However, we do receive a lot of attention by Congress, because Congress is our sole funder. So how does NSF make grants? Well, it uses taxpayer dollars to make awards to investigators to do science. So that means that awards from NSF are using taxpayer dollars, and that you have to keep in mind as you prepare the proposal. Our mission, we've existed since 1950 to promote the progress of science. Welcome, come on in. To advance national health, prosperity, and welfare, and to secure the national defense, which is a pretty broad mission statement. And some aspects of this, you may go, well, isn't that the Department of Defense, and isn't that NIH? And definitely there are aspects of this that do fall on those other agencies. However, this really, the first sentence is the key here, but some of the research we fund could have security and also health-related impacts. So not so much clinical, but medical geographers, for example, have found a very happy home at NSF doing spatial analysis of health disparities research. That's very much falling in this mission. So NSF, like many bureaucracies, is broken down into bits, and we are broken down into directorates that actually parallel in some ways how universities are often divided into colleges. So there's one on biological sciences, computer engineering by itself, geosciences, math, and then we are geography and spatial sciences. We're actually part of the social sciences directorate, social, behavioral, and economic sciences. You might say, well, I'm a physical geographer, so how does that work? Well, what that means is that the program called Geography and Spatial Sciences sits in this directorate, but as a geographer or spatial scientist, you could be applying to programs all over the agencies, and we've had lots of very successful geographers get funding from programs in geosciences, and so climatologists and geomorphologists may get funding from here. Biogeographers may get funding out of biological sciences. Arctic, right? There's a whole program on Arctic, and geographers have been successful there. So as geographers, you're actually well suited to be competitive all over the agency. But the program called Geography and Spatial Sciences, its home is in the Social Sciences Directorate. So just some bureaucratic background, because that can be confusing to people new to NSF, is that each directorate then has divisions, and divisions have programs. So I'm the program director for Geography and Spatial Sciences, and I'm in the division of Behavioral and Cognitive Sciences, which means anthropological sciences and psychological sciences. And then I'm in that Social, Behavioral, and Economic Sciences directorate. Geomorphology and Land Dynamics, which is this abbreviation, sits in the division, is a program in the Division of Earth Sciences in the Geosciences Directorate. Ecosystem Sciences is a program in the Division of Environmental Biology in the Biological Sciences Directorate. That's sort of how the structure is. Now, what's nice is that we talk to each other, and there are processes within NSF that allow you your one proposal, because if you have one idea, it has to be one proposal. You can't be submitting it to 3 places. But within, we can have it be co-reviewed amongst programs. And we do that a lot just because geographers tend to sit on edges. And so we do a lot of, I think of our panel coming up, we have about 50 proposals that are being co-reviewed with other programs around the agency. And I think we're record-setting in that. Makes for logistical nightmares sometimes, but it does mean that we try to give our scientists the best opportunity to get funding from multiple sources within NSF. Now, National Science Foundation, at its core, it supports basic science. Oops, did I just do something wrong? I just must have clicked escape from current slide. There we go. So it supports basic science. So it is interested in supporting research that advances basic conceptualizations, basic frameworks, wants to advance theory at some level. Applied work may get some attention if it is tied to theory building. So it's very important to keep in mind when you consider NSF as a source that the science you want to do is asking some fundamental questions, some basic questions about frameworks, conceptualization of within your topic. Any proposal, any topic suggested to us needs to be grounded in a framework. It needs to be derived from a literature that exists, and if it doesn't exist yet, then you need to point out how it doesn't exist, because you're actually maybe starting out with something very new, which is exciting to us. But mostly, most people are trying to build on other people's work, and you might take central place theory and you want to be advancing it with some new ideas and be moving that into the future. You need to be using scientifically sound approaches to answer the questions that you pose, the research questions that you pose. Some people say, well, NSF will only support hypothesis-driven science. A lot of the science we support is hypothesis-driven, but a lot of science we support is framed using research questions, which is perfectly acceptable. Another myth out there is that NSF does not support qualitative methods. Wrong. We do. Certainly in the social sciences directorate, we absolutely support qualitative methods. However, those methods need to be rigorous. They need to be based on demonstrated methods, and they can't be as exploratory or as humanistically oriented as some geographers would like it to be. There still need to be research questions and a plan of how you're going to answer those using methods that will derive answers to that. Fundamentally, you need to generate generalizable knowledge. And this can be very confusing to graduate students because you want to work on something really unique. Sometimes we'll see proposals where the focus is on something so unique that you wonder, well, who is going to care about that so unique topic? So it may be wonderful that you found a lacuna in the literature and you want to focus on it, but be sure to then be able to bring it back to informing basic theory and being able to advance knowledge with whatever case material you may be working on. It's not that we don't like case studies. We certainly support case studies, but the case needs to be very compelling and make an argument and justification about how it's going to advance broader knowledge. All right, so who to target? There are all of these core programs, and I've mentioned several of them. Then there are also a bunch of core interdisciplinary programs. Bunch of acronyms here. My apologies for that. CNH stands for Coupled Natural and Human System. EEID is the Ecology and Evolution of Infectious Diseases. There's a number of others. Then there are shorter-term interdisciplinary programs, and these come and go. NSF has a new director every 6 years or so. There are new assistant directors that come in, and it's not unlike new deans. You know, a new dean comes, they have a new vision for the college. They have new things they want to trot out. Same thing at NSF, new directors come in and they have new portfolios. A bunch of years ago, we did a lot on environment, science and engineering for, and education for sustainability was a cluster of programs, all very focused on environmental topics. The nexus of food and water and energy is one that was active for a while. It's still active, but sort of on the wane. Smart and Connected Communities is an interdisciplinary program with computer scientists and others that is very active right now. And on it goes with infrastructure and data kinds of programs. These come and go. For graduate students, these don't really work. You'll need to go to core programs. But for faculty, it's good to be aware of what is sort of the hot topic at NSF and whether your research might fit that. So speaking of which, the current director, her big thing are these 10 big ideas. No, not the big 10. Some would want that. It's not. It's 10 big ideas. But there's some research areas that have great potential for geographers. One of which is navigating the new Arctic. And that solicitation just came out. Solicitations are basically the call for proposals that are put out. Another one is harnessing the data revolution, which is an exciting area for more of our GIS technology folks, but really anybody working on big data. The one where social scientists are most involved is work at the human technology frontier, shaping the future. Understanding rules of life, very relevant to our biogeographers. And then the other two, probably a little less to our geography community, the quantum leap, leading the next quantum revolution, and windows on the universe, astrophysics. Don't forget, our director is an astrophysicist, so it has to be a program on astrophysics. And then a few process ideas that might be of interest to some of you. One in particular is mid-scale research infrastructure. NSF is really interested in supporting more long-term infrastructure projects that can, in the immediate, just support the actual practice of doing research, and that can then move so that the research, it isn't to specific PIs, but it may be on hubs or centers for interdisciplinary research. Totally interested in convergence, so interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, all of that. Now the buzzword is convergence, really bringing together, or problem-based research that brings together different disciplines. Geographers are super prepped for this because we're sort of the original interdisciplinary discipline. So these are all opportunities. They'll all have individual solicitations. Some are further along than others. Some have had some Dear Colleague letters come out already. Dear Colleague letters are another way that NSF communicates with prospective investigators. But if you find your research fitting any of these ideas, then it's a good opportunity to stay tuned. Okay, some basic advice that builds on what I've just said already. Proposing some compelling research that is curiosity driven. So it has to be something really novel and different. NSF is not as interested in supporting science that we kind of already know most of it and you want to just add a little bit to. We want to really identify and support the research that's truly potentially transformative, and that comes from some really compelling and different ideas. Building on what I said earlier about this issue of too narrow and needing to generalize, right? You may need to drill down and go narrow for a case material, but you actually want to be able to generalize from that case. So start with the theory, then go to the case. So instead of saying, I want to study XYZ in the Amazon, as I have done, I have to say, the Amazon is a really good place to investigate how people manipulated soils in the past to benefit their food systems. So instead of saying, I want to go to the Amazon and study there, I say, the reason it's such a good place is that the kinds of things that I can look at there will advance the knowledge about how people manipulated soils in the past to improve their agricultural system. Methods, research is okay and needs to be with substance. So you need to have a very clear and compelling research design. Now, when you then sit down and start to write this research proposal, you need to make that compelling argument as to why anybody would care about your research. And here, the why should anyone care is not just your small circle of people who you might be presenting with at the next AAG meeting, but it's about those, but also spiraling out to society. So again, we are a taxpayer-based agency. So what benefits are there to US society of your research? And this is often many leaps away for many people, but this is becoming more and more important as a means of evaluating proposals. Come on in.
I'm sorry.
Hi, that's okay. Being sure you're up to date on the state of the knowledge. How will your research build and contribute to that knowledge? What types of methods best serve your inquiry, and is there anything novel about them? So sometimes people are using tried and true methods. Sometimes you are integrating some methods from disparate areas. And if your methods are novel, that is good to highlight in your proposal. That maybe you don't want to say this is the first time ever because you're never really sure about that, but you want to explain how it is that you're integrating some different kinds of methods that have been used in different areas of research, and you're combining them. And then 1 and 6 kind of connect. How might U.S. society benefit from your research? And there's proposals are all evaluated using 2 criteria, intellectual merit and broader impacts. And the benefit to U.S. society is part of that broader impact that you need to pay increasing attention to. In geography, we use something called the Isserman curve to help us evaluate projects. And what this is an idea of that over time, a line of inquiry starts, and you don't know much about it yet, but then as you start to accumulate knowledge on that line of inquiry over time, you start to build up knowledge about it. There are certain phases of a line of inquiry. Let's take a geomorphological example, sort of the way that rivers react to flood pulses, for example. Well, a lot about that is already understood. So that kind of line of inquiry, like what happens when there's a really torrential storm, what happens to the dynamics of within a floodplain, some basic science of that already exists. So we're at sort of D&E phase. And so if you're going to study a stream somewhere in New Jersey to observe that pattern, to understand it in that particular place, that may be a perfectly good topic to do as a thesis, but it probably will not get funded by NSF because we're interested in supporting really new ideas about which little is known. Ideally, enough is known so that you've kind of tested it, had a few, done some preliminary work. But we want to be supporting research that's really in its acceleration in new knowledge being generated. And this, we don't have a huge budget, and that budget has been flat for many years. So we have to be careful in how we spend our money, and it needs to be spent on new and innovative research. So in crafting your proposal, work towards a clear and specific research design. You may be in a research seminar right now and reading all the latest literature on topics. You may be steeped in all sorts of cool and new jargon. Well, take all that, but write this in a clear and explicit way. Try not to over-jargonize, and I'll tell you that one of the reasons is that the reviewers may come from different areas of geography, and you want everybody to be able to understand what you are talking about. So you do want to identify the lacuna in the literature. You want to pose some research question, define the hypotheses if you're using that, or at least very clear, and not too many questions. Often we see proposals, with like 5 questions, and each has got like sub-questions, and simpler is better. Some fundamental, just a few questions with very clear methods and very clear plans for data analysis. And the method should be identified and tied to the questions you're asking. Don't give us a list of methods, but what about each of them if you're using mixed methods, which seems to be the trend in geography? What about each of the mixes is going to help you answer the questions you've posed? Give us some plans about the analysis of data. That can be hard to do when you're just starting out doing research because you don't really know yet what you're doing. But you need to know enough about it that you can write with some clarity that these are the statistical methods I'm going to use. Don't just say I'm going to put all my qualitative data into Atlas T or one of those qualitative apps. How are you going to do your text analysis? What are the themes you're going to use to do that work? And so then, do you have some anticipated answers to your questions. Do you have a sense of where this might be going? Or if you don't, write about that. If you're doing research that is a little bit risky, maybe it's something so new it hasn't really been tried, then anticipate some issues that reviewers may ask, like this has really not been tried. So do they have a plan B of being able to answer the questions they've posed? And then at the end, you want to be sure that you have plans to disseminate and to be contributing back to informing the literature and the theoretical work. Now, I mentioned already that one of the big tasks we have as program officers is to manage proposals through the review cycle. And NSF is known around the world as having the gold standard of merit review for its proposals. So it's a transparent, relatively transparent process, especially compared with real foundations where it's often you get a yay or a nay, you have no idea why you were declined. At NSF, at least you will get feedback. So your proposal will be reviewed usually by a set of 3 groups of people, although for doctoral dissertation improvement proposals, it tends to just be 2 groups. But for regular proposals, we send them out for review. So some of you in this room have been targets of my attempts at getting reviewers in years past. We seek out all faculty at institutions all over the US, even internationally if they have expertise in certain areas. And we send out each proposal to hopefully 4 to 6 reviewers to try to get a few to say yes. And those typically are more specialists, people who know a lot about the topic of that proposal. Then all of our proposals go to a panel, and a panel is a group of people who meet either in person at our headquarters in Alexandria, Virginia, or increasingly in a virtual space, but as a group evaluate. And panel members do both a review and then they talk about the proposal as a group. And this part here is what will generate a panel summary that you as an investigator will receive feedback on. The reviewers write reviews that you will receive anonymously. They know who you are, the investigator, but you will never know who the reviewers are. Then the third audience is us, program directors, seeking to invest in the best science. We have a little budget, a lot of proposals. We get input from the panel, we get input from those specialists, and then we have to decide. And we then actually don't even make final decisions. It goes up to a division director who makes the actual recommendation to fund or not. Be explicit, not suggestive in your proposals. Don't make people, so these reviewers are often, especially the panelists, they're often reading a lot of these proposals in a pile. And so you don't want to irritate them. So you want to be explicit. Yes, actually let them find exactly what your research is about. Some of the most frustrating proposals I've had to deal with, and I have to write an analysis of each one, is when I have a hard time figuring out what it's about. Because the investigator has not made it very clear, like this is the question, here are my methods. It's all kind of stuck in a research seminar paper style. So you want to be very, very explicit. Focus on what you will do, not too much background. This is tricky business because you want to give enough background, there's literature you've based it on, but you don't want to get beyond like page 4 for DDRIs on the background because you need to have enough space in there to talk about your methods and about your plans for data analysis. Have a solid and clear research plan that connects. How will you answer the post questions? Yeah, okay. So we're a bureaucracy, and there are lots of rules and regulations about the way that the proposal has to be prepared. It's just the way it is, and every funder is going to have their own rules and regs. These rules tend to change with some regularity. And so you want to be sure you're up to date. And let me warn you, doctoral students, you take charge of figuring out what the latest rules and regs are, because your advisor may be based on a few years ago. I suffered this myself. I had an advisor who had me put something in a budget that was disallowed. I got the award, but I missed out on some because I didn't pay attention. So the rules and regs change. We have, in GSS, we have solicitations for the DDRI and the regular proposals. So very important to read this. It's really dry material, I admit. It's a lot, but it's a lot of P's and Q's that you do have to work through. Everybody at a university like Rutgers, you have a sponsored research office. Not sure what its acronym is here, but you'll be working with somebody there, and it's actually that office that will be submitting the proposal for you. So it's not, you don't, every year we get a few doctoral students going, where do I submit my proposal? Like, yeah, you have to go back to your sponsored research office. So be sure you are aware of all those rules. So there's a whole bunch here, and I'm not going to talk through each one of them, but there are many parts to a proposal, and the part that most people think about is this one, the project description. And you've read a lot about that, which is good because it is the key part. But there are all of these other parts, and you want to be sure that you use them strategically. So there's something called your biosketch that is included. Certain format, very specific format. Be sure you're up to date on the format. A little star means most compliance problems, which means you get a stern note from me saying it's not compliant, fix this now. Biosketches used to be in that category. But it's in this biosketch that you can make a case for why you already have the qualifications for doing the research you're going to do. There's a part there called synergistic activities, and in there you can, it's up to you what you call those 5 bullet points. You can provide information that you then don't need to repeat in the precious 11 pages of your DDRI project description. So be aware that there are all these parts, and be sure you use them strategically. Another part that is often underutilized is the facilities, equipment, and other resources. So this is where you explain what facilities here at Rutgers you'll be using. So if you're lab-based, this is where you can put stuff about you've got the right lab to do the research you're proposing to do. Data management plan. A lot of confusion about data management plan. It's one of the more recent additions to what you need to submit. And this is really all about open science. Taxpayer dollars are supporting your collecting of data. How does that become available to the public in the future? It used to be, and I'm case in point, I had a DDRI, my field notes from the Amazon are sitting in my attic, not useful to anyone else. And that we can no longer do. So we now have to, every proposal has to have a data management plan where you have a plan for how you're going to collect, what you're going to collect, how you're going to collect it, and then how you're going to preserve it for future use. And then in addition to that, putting it somewhere so it's discoverable. This is hard. And I'll say geography and spatial sciences and social sciences in general are a little behind our friends in geosciences and in the biological sciences in coming up with good repositories and good ways of doing this so we can all discover each other's stuff. I mean, the future of meta-analysis that might come out of this is going to be incredible. But we do have to have data in a format that we can actually use it. Anybody know of a great place to put social science data? Anybody ever had to deposit social? ICPSR at the University of Michigan. It's the Interconsortium Social and Political Data something. Not getting it all perfect there, but they've been the standard bearer of this. Now, I bet you that Rutgers University, the library at Rutgers University is now such a depository. I see Kevin nodding his head, yes. So that's great. Not everybody is lucky enough to be at a university where the library is taking the lead, but Many libraries are now becoming the place where eventually you can deposit your data in a format that other people can use it. Now, so putting it on your departmental website or departmental computer in a locked office doesn't work for the long term. It's totally fine while you're doing the research, but not in the future. You, as the PI, can determine when you will do that. And for some people, it takes longer to digest and to analyze data, and you want to, of course, you have the right to have the first crack at publishing on it. You've collected it. So you can determine the timing of this, but it needs to be within reason. Like, you can't say, well, 30 years from now, make it, no, that won't work. So this is getting a lot more attention at all levels. And you will likely be hearing more conversations. And we program officers, because we often are not doing science quite at the scale that involves this, we actually need to hear from you all, investigators, the kinds of challenges you're having with this. So, because it's really a problem that all of us scientists have in how to preserve data into the future. Writing a proposal is the genre of writing. I'd argue it's harder than a manuscript. So give yourself lots of time. Do not try to do this the week before it's due. Most universities make you hand things in earlier, which is good. Hopefully your advisor is making you hand things in earlier if you're a doctoral student. So it takes time, it needs revisions, it needs work, it needs eyeballs on it. So try to have remember those different sets of reviewers? When you have a draft of your proposal, be sure you share it with those around you, advisors, colleagues, fellow students, who know a lot about your science, because they can tell you, look, maybe that sample size is not right, is this really the best method? But also share it with people really far away. So if you're a human geographer, ask a physical geographer to read your proposal, and vice versa. Reason for that is, if they can make sense of your argument for why it's compelling research and your basic research design, then you've got it a better chance with those reviewers who are going to be broadly trained geographers, but who are not in your specific area. So trying to write to that audience that is further outside of your direct field is very helpful. In the proposal, you do need to have evidence for all of these things, and again, I've already alluded to some of this. But obviously, if you're going to be working overseas, you need to have the language and cultural competency. You need to have the technical expertise to do things. Some preliminary work is really helpful to demonstrate, and you need to have the networks and connections to be able to do what you say you're going to do. If you're going to go interview the mayor of said city to learn about what their strategies are for transportation infrastructure building, then how do you have a connection to get into that mayor's office? The budget. People often ask about the budget. Well, is this budget appropriate? And in our solicitation, we give a bound on a rough approximate, because our program budget is $7 million per year, and it's been flat for years. The numbers of awards we typically give in a certain year has stayed about the same, and we know from over time, most of our awards are in the $300,000 to $400,000 average. So, and those are usually for 2 to 3 years. So this is for the regular proposals. DDRI, it's $18,000 for a maximum of 2 years. But as you craft the budget, and I urge you to craft a real budget and not just go backwards from the 18K if you are a doctoral student, to really ask yourself, is it necessary for the research? Because you don't want to be padding the budget, you want to have justifications for it. But yes, if you end up coming up with a project that is many, many millions of dollars, once you've included the overhead, pop quiz for doctoral students, what's overhead? Anybody know what overhead is? How much? Okay, no doctoral students volunteering. Faculty. What's the overhead, the indirect rate? Anybody know? 55? Okay. Anybody know, does Rutgers have a rate for DDRIs? No. Okay. There are a few that have come up with DDRI rates. So the overhead, so that means that you come up with a budget and the university adds 55% to that. So really you're earning less than half of the amount that you're submitting. Now if you're smart, you work off campus, and you make your point to your grants office that you are working off campus and for them to apply the off-campus rate. Kevin, do you know what it is for Rutgers? 26. Yeah, it's often about 26%. That's a lot less than 55. So especially for doctoral students, if you're going to spend a year in Tibet, doing whatever you're doing there, you want to make that case. They will not automatically do this for you because they want 55%, because it helps support all, the university. So you need to ask for it. Some universities have gone so far as to have a DDRI rate. All right, let's see how we're doing. Again, irritations, right? This slide is irritating because you don't want to make your reviewers irritated. Dense text, impossible to read. Figures so small you can't read them, even though they still pass compliance. Hiding the purpose of your research, buried on page 5. No, you want to be right there, explicit about it. Arithmetic errors, really bad. Really bad to do that one. We are a bureaucracy. It takes time. So you have to give yourself time, and then you have to be really patient, because once it's been submitted, it takes at least 6 months for you to get any sort of answer from us. And that's because we have to go through a whole bunch of steps before we can give you a yay or nay. So doctoral students, we no longer have a deadline. So we used to have 2 deadlines in the year for doctoral students. Now we have no deadline. What do you think that did? Show of hands, did it increase proposals or did it decrease proposals? Increase? Decrease. Very good. You already got the word on the street. People need deadlines. So that means that you need to work with your advisor to set deadlines so that you get the proposal done and submitted. But the rule is with the doctoral proposals, your project can't start until 6 months after you submit it, because it takes us that long to get back to you. Sometimes it might be sooner. Sometimes, hopefully not much later than that. Oh yeah, I mentioned this already in passing. Very important. Important as you prepare for this. Intellectual merit is really what most people think about, right? It's the advancing of knowledge. That's the generalizability. It's an advancing of theory. But then there's the broader impacts, and this is the societal benefit. And this, for doctoral dissertation proposals, what's nice is that right away the broader impact is the training of you as a scientist. So yay, you already score here. But it's nice to see some more creativity here. Can you include some undergraduates in your research? Are you doing something creative with K through 12 training? There are any number of these, and I think I have a slide, and I'm not going to go over all of those, but they'll be in the packet that you get later. Broader impacts may be inherent in the research, or they can flow out of the activities. There's large variation in them. For those of you writing regular proposals, it's really broader impacts where we're starting to see some terrific creativity, and where sometimes if the intellectual merit is really high, it's at the broader impacts where that breaks the tie. Our National Science Board had a list of suggested broader impacts, but note this is not a checklist, it's just a list of suggestions. So increase in participation in STEM, scientific literacy in society, increase in national security, important one, economic competitiveness, all these things, but you don't need to do them all in one proposal. But these are the types of things we want PIs to think about more creatively. You don't necessarily need to do them, but you need to be generating information that could be used by others to do that. Case in point, A lot of proposals will say, my research will be of interest to policymakers. Great. How are those policymakers going to know about your terrific new research? Usually there's a silence there. So think about, how are you going to disseminate your great new information that policymakers might find useful in a way that they're going to read it? So think about outlets, dissemination vehicles beyond the annals and the GR and other geographical journals in white papers or other means that local, state, whatever policymakers might actually get to your information. Most proposals are declined. Most proposals are declined. So join the club, everybody gets declined. Only about, depending on the year, et cetera, 25% of our DDRIs are awarded, and less than that in the regular, depending on the year. And that's how it is for most programs. So most proposals are declined. But having written a ton of analyses of those declined proposals, I'd say that the line I most reference is there was insufficient detail in the research plan to convince the reviewers that this was compelling. So the plans for data analysis is another weakness, often not sufficient, and that there's a disconnect between, there may be a really great start at the proposal about the theory, but then no connection back of, okay, I'm anticipating these results, and how am I going to bring them back around? So if you're declined, again, welcome to the club. Do not feel any shame, because that's really the majority. Chill and don't call us. Actually, that doesn't happen anymore. I guess 20 years ago, so people used to call as soon as they were declined. But we hardly answer our phones, but we love email. And we absolutely don't mind talking to you after it's settled. You've had a chance to look at the reviews and the panel summary, and you've gone back and reread your own proposal, and you go, yeah, they were probably kind of right. But please do call us, because sometimes the panel summary and the reviews can be a little bit cryptic. They might be going against each other. So reach out to us. We're happy to talk. And then evaluate. Again, if you go, oh gosh, yeah, I really should have refined that methodological part, et cetera, do that. If these are more general, then consider other funding sources. Again, it may be actually a really cool project. It may not fit right for NSF. But you can talk with us about that. So what if you're funded? Well, yay, that's, feather in your cap, you made it. You probably have a whole long list then from us to do, and I cannot overstress the importance of title and abstract. So Congress is probably our main audience here. They read these, they're released. And we're responsible for title and abstract, but we will ask you to draft an abstract of your research. And this needs to be written in such a way that it makes sense to the US public, i.e. Congress. And so we will have more conversations about that if it's on touchy subjects like climate change or any number of other things, which we continue to support. We might have to do a little massaging with certain words, but we do support. It takes a while to process because, again, it's actually the granting office that eventually makes the award, not us. Then actually do the research. I know that might sound strange, but our Office of the Inspector General is finding award hoarding. And I check as soon as somebody submits their report, their annual report, which please submit those. The first thing I do is, have they spent any money? And it's surprising how many awards after a year they've spent no money. I'm like, well, what did you want it for? Yeah, please do it. Communicate with us if there are issues, and disseminate the results promptly, and let us know what you are disseminating. And please do submit your reports. Questions, contact us. We have an alias, gssinfo@nsf. It comes to all of us. We really prefer phone calls but after an email, send us an email first, then we will set up a phone call. We are at AAG every year, and I do some outreach like I'm doing here with you. we're at the AAG. This year, and I failed to put that right here, we have a webinar coming up November 8th for the DDRI program. 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will have fallen back. I did send it out to the chairs list and to grad directors, so hopefully Robin got that message and disseminated it. We will be blasting it out again about a week before. It'll be a webinar really for people who have questions about the DDRI. In particular, we're calling it the Urban Myth Buster. Hope I might have already busted a few for you, but if you have more questions, we have seen a significant drop in our DDRI program. And we're surprised, not totally surprised, because we know every other part of the agency that has dropped deadlines has seen a significant drop in submissions. But we know that there's still a lot of doctoral research that is going on, and we want to be sure that you all know about it and that we can continue to support you. So with that, I will stop and take any questions. Thank you. Go ahead. Yeah.
That's really interesting, useful. My name is Asher, and I did a review for you last week. Nice to meet you. I have a question about the broader impacts, and I think in one of your slides you had broader impacts in quotes benefiting, or in brackets, U.S. society.
Yeah.
And my research is international. I know a lot of our students' work and our faculty's work is international, and I've reviewed a lot of proposals that are not U.S. based. And so there's always this question of how the social relevance of the work in the context where you're doing the work fits into broader impacts, or if we have to sort of really bolster the kind of outreach training side, or if we have to extend arguments to how things happening, in my case, in India, would potentially allow policymakers in the U.S. to learn from stuff happening in India, which is like a second degree impact. So I'm just wondering, because I don't actually remember the U.S. part. So if I'm saying I'm improving the lives of a whole bunch of people in India, can that count as broader impacts, or does it always have to come back to the U.S. taxpayer?
The reason it's in the brackets is that that's being emphasized more and more. And so benefiting people in India is great. And I've worked internationally myself, so I totally get that. But you also need to take that to that secondary level to the best of your ability. And that's hard for people who work internationally. You've never really had to frame it that way. But to the extent you can, I mean, the easy part, of course, is including students, right? US students, especially if they can interact with local students. But then, yes, is there anything that you're learning there that could be of interest to US society? An example I have of a former doctoral student, he's now a prof at Michigan, his research was on the Masai Mara in Kenya, and it had to do with tensions between the Maasai and cows and parks and boundaries around parks. And he learned to spin that to be able to inform management around parks in the US. And so it's that sort of, again, it's not that you have to do that research in the US, but thinking about what new knowledge am I generating that could be of interest and useful in US society. So we are needing to see more of that. And I'm saying it, I'm encouraging you to challenge yourself to think that way, because that really helps us support your research. Because if scientists are not providing that kind of thing, then again, the tiebreaker might be happening there. I mean, NSF remains interested in an international collaboration, so that piece is also important. If you're working with collaborators in India, highlight that. So, yeah. Other questions? Yes, Robin.
One of the things that I found is that students who are successful with the DRs, that they really often do have to do that second time. I think, and sometimes, but I just wanted to, is that still the case that they have to sort of, often that second time, they'll do it once and then they'll fail, and then they'll do it again, they'll revise it.
The proposal, yeah.
I just want to see if that's still sort of true in terms of success. Revised proposals.
I'm just thinking through our most recent rounds. I'd say it's a mixed bag. I mean, we only allow 2, in part to try to prevent a quick return, because we do know that that used to happen. People would churn it around, you know, without really doing a redo. But I'd say we do support quite a number that come in just for the first time. So it's, I mean, many benefit. I'd say it's probably 1/3 on the first time and 2/3 on the second. So yes, there's a lot you can gain from the feedback on that first round, but we do have successful students with just the first go. Go ahead.
I have a number of questions, but I was thinking specifically about the review process. I was wondering what the relationship is between the specialist individual reviewers and then the panel, how they synthesize the feedback, and if it's just a kind of consensus-based discussion or if there's kind of weighting that goes on. So that's a kind of first question, partially from a reviewer's perspective, wondering how I
Sure, yeah. Does anybody listen? Yeah.
Then the other is, I know GSS has specific review criteria that are different from the standard review criteria, and how those are also, those figure in proposal
Sure.
ranking. If it's just a matter of tie breaking, or if there's certain elements of that that really matter more at the level of the review panel rather than individual
Right.
reviewers. Because as I recall, I can't remember what they are, but they seem quite close to the merit review ones, but slightly different.
Right, yeah, so they add 2, they're an addition, not a substitution for intellectual merit and broader impact. And they're really looking at the significance, the long-term significance of the project and the likelihood of success of the project. And so reviewers are asked to score that. It used to be on a scale of 1 to 7, it's now 1 to 5. And a number of ad hocs don't always do it, but at the panel we do ask the panelists to do it, and it helps determine where a proposal gets placed on a board of competitiveness. In terms of the beginning of your question about the voice of the ad hoc reviewers, we do our best when we are running those panel meetings to remind the panelists in the room that there are reviews that are from people who are not in the room, and to be sure that those the positives and negatives that were articulated do come in. Certainly at our level, we incorporate all of the feedback from the ad hocs in our ultimate decision making, and even if the panelists were ignoring, we include it for sure. But, yeah. I think we're probably done for time. So if people have other specific questions, I'm happy to stay here. And I know some of you are coming to lunch, but I think to let people get to class and other commitments. Thank you all for coming.